Hey there, Bible buddies. I've got another Cambridge Cameo review for you today. And if you guys aren't tired of Cambridge Cameos yet, don't worry, you will be by the end of this excursion. So thankfully, this one at least has a few features that we haven't seen yet. So hopefully it won't bore you to tears. But it is another Cambridge Cameo. For those of you who are not in the know, I have quite a few Cambridge Cameos that I am reviewing, and I'm going to try and space them out so you guys aren't overkilled by Cambridge Cameos. But there will be quite a few, and then at the end I'm going to do one big kind of comparison video between all of them, just so you can see the differences in like papers and leather textures. Essentially, is all it really boils down to. But we'll go ahead and get started with this one. So this is a Cambridge Camo, obviously, right? And this is a genuine leather edition. And you can see the interesting thing here is the Yapp. Now you don't really see Yapps very often with the Cambridge Cameos, and I'm not sure why that is. But it's super interesting to see. I enjoy a good Yapp, and I think this one looks very nice. I'm sure it looked much better when it was minty fresh, but the years have still been good to it. We do have an inner perimeter line and an outer perimeter line as well. And you guys can see that there. And like I said, it's a genuine leather, but it does have a very nice grain. It's like a pebbled grain. It's very tactile, which I love when you can feel the grain. The grooves are very deep. But it's a very nice grain. It's a very nice grain for genuine leather, for sure. The perimeter lines do continue over the spine, and then you have Holy Bible. And if you notice, there's nothing else. There's no red letter. There's no dictionary concordance. There's not even like the Cambridge, I guess the large logo. They do have a small Cambridge logo down there, and it does say Teacher's Bible, which is interesting. And if I remember correctly, the only real difference between the Teacher's edition, the Teacher's Bible edition, and the other editions is that the Teacher's Bible has a dictionary in it as well as the concordance. So there's that. On the back, you just have that beautiful grain going again. And you can see this one's kind of gotten a little beat up over the years. It's gotten some wears, some tear on a couple like nicks, and some the leather's kind of cracking and splitting. There's not really much you can do. I hydrated and did my normal routine, so it feels a little bit better than it did. But this is really to be expected, with all Bibles. So yes, even your $300 premium Allen, after a while, is going to end up with cracks on the tops and bottom of its spine. It's just the nature of the beast, so to speak. So I would not sweat it or fret it way too much if you put a ding in your Bible or do anything like that. You're not going to be able to preserve it. We have to remember that Bibles are made out of paper, literally like the most fragile substance on earth. And obviously we should treat it with respect, but don't go crazy and put it under a glass case or anything like that. It's never going to last, right? So let's go from there. So you can see there is one blue ribbon. Now this ribbon, we'll start at the bottom, actually, I'll show you the ribbon. So this ribbon was one that I replaced. I usually try and replace with the same color that was there, if I know the color, right? Sometimes the ribbon's like completely torn and shot. So I would imagine this is a blue ribbon to begin with. It may have been a black ribbon. That's typically all that Cambridge ever used. But I did replace it with this kind of double-sided satin blue ribbon, and it is a very nice kind of floppy blue ribbon. I like it, and I did a little ankle cut there. Looks good, right? Makes it look very, regal and very nice. I don't know, whatever. As far as the headbands and the tailbands go, it's just a white woven fabric. You can kind of see it there. It's a little twisty thing. Different from the normal, red and gold that we see. Now, there is a red under gold art gilt. We'll look at that when we open up the Bible. You can see the gilt job at least looks very nicely done. And it is it does look like kind of a gold. I mean, it does have a very nice luster, but it kind of has like almost an orangey color to it, which is interesting. I'm not sure why that is, if it would have been this dark to begin with, or maybe just oxidized over the years. I know gold doesn't oxidize, but maybe whatever material they used oxidized. But it has been very well preserved. As far as the liners go, this is a synthetic material on this side, and then a black paper, matte paper on this side. The synthetic material feels really strange. It does have like a slight texture to it, but it is very fine. This I like better than Cambridge's modern kind of rubbery stuff they use, but still I'm not a fan of synthetics altogether. I feel like if you're spending a ton of money on a Cambridge, you should have leather on the inside. We'll take a look at the corner work. Not that it's much to write home about. It is stamped with genuine leather there, and a little scroll. That's kind of neat. On the back, you have the corner work, and then it is stamped with silk sewn, which is the kind of the binding on the back. Essentially, the signatures, right, are all sewn together, and then they're sewn individually, right, as groups of pages, and then they're all sewn together on top of that to hold it all together, the book binding. And in this instance, I guess they use silk. And silk, as far as I know, is like the strongest natural material as far as tensile strength, which is like pulling strength, right? Which would explain why they use silk, because it'll last a long time. Now I think they use nylon. It'd be nice if they still use silk. I just feel like silk is more of an elegant experience for the Bible. Not that I see it or even have to deal with it, and maybe the nylon lasts longer, but I still think it'd be cool to use silk. But I do prefer vintage Bibles, so maybe that's just my personal bias speaking. So let's go ahead and get into the Bible. We have like a incredibly thick sheets here. Several of them, 3, 4. They're not quite cardstock, but they are like very rigid. And they almost feel like kind of coated. Yeah, so you probably have to be very careful if you're going to write on them. Then you have a blank sheet here, and you have your title page. You have the Holy Bible, Old and New Testaments, and this is going to look very familiar between all of the Cambridge Cameos. We do have down here where it's indicated, it says Cameo 16MO Refs India paper, and obviously it's the Cambridge Cameo. The 16MO is the size of the paper, so it's a 16MO size. Means it's a little smaller than an 8VO, I guess, a little smaller than a full-size Bible, so it's like a hand-size Bible. And then it does have center column references, and it is on India paper. It is also pronouncing text, so you're going to see all the little marks and accents and all that kind of cool stuff throughout it. We'll turn a page here. On the bottom, we just have printed in Great Britain. And then we have the Epistle Dedicatory. After that, we have the table of contents. Kind of standard. And again, this is all going to look very familiar to you. Then there are the table of signs used in this book. And you have the first book of Moses called Genesis. Now you can see here how incredibly, and you can hear it, the cockling on this edition, which is, this sort of craziness. I had somebody mention on one of my other videos that, cockling happens with all vintage editions. That is not the case. Cockling just really has to do with the way the binding was done. I have heard personally that you get cockling either when there's too much glue applied to the back of the spine, or whenever they tighten the spine too much, basically tighten the threads down too much, you end up with this sort of craziness. And not all of my editions have this. Vintage editions, it's just a few and far between. But goodness, it drives me crazy. And some editions only have this on the first signature. Like once you get to the overcast stitching, or after the first signature, you can see it gets a little bit better here. So we'll flip in a little bit. So see here, it lays nice and flat. And when you turn the page, you hear the page, right? Like the sheet here making noise, but you don't hear the gutter making that crinkling, cracking sound. So it's just for whatever reason in that first signature. So I'm not too sure what the deal is with that. Let's go ahead and get you framed up a little bit better. Whoop, there we go. Now we'll go ahead and take a look at the text, and again, it's gonna seem very familiar here. You have the book names and the chapter numbers on the top outer corners. You have a running header in the kind of top inner corner there and into the gutter. It is a double column verse by verse format. You do have center column references. They are economizing, right? So the book is going to start kind of at the end of the previous book. The new book is going to start at the end of the previous book. They're not going to give it its own page. You do have a double line drop cap there. I'll go ahead and show you guys the Pilgrim markers right there on 29. And then you can see some of the references as well if you're curious about those, how they handle the presentation. Let's go ahead and flip to the poetic section. And I'm going to go hopefully a little quickly through these. I know I tend to ramble, but a cameo is a cameo is a cameo for the most part. I know there's subtle differences between them, but I don't want to spend too long looking at the same thing we've already seen. All right, so you can see here, it's a double column format. There's not going to be any sort of poetic setting or anything like that. I will show you the paper. And you can see this paper is very nice. Just very well done. The paper, and again, it's India paper, so you're going to have kind of superb quality there as far as show through is concerned. And granted, there is a little bit of show through you can see on this, but this edition is much thinner than all the other Cambridge Cameos that I have. And I'm not sure if they did that specifically just for the teacher edition, because maybe they thought the teachers going to be traveling with it more, so they would need kind of something a little more portable, or what the deal was. But for whatever reason, they used the thinner India paper on this one. For me, I don't prefer the thinner paper. Sometimes it gets really hard to turn. This one's not so bad. I found that if the Bible gets exposed to a lot of humidity, it gets really, really hard to turn. So these pages aren't too bad, but they're still very flimsy. I feel like I have to be super delicate with them. Otherwise they're just going to tear right off, which I've seen. So that's why I worry about it. We have the end of the prophets there. Then you have a blank page in between the Old and the New Testaments. You have your New Testament title page. You will notice that there's a lack of red letter because it's a black letter edition. So they didn't indicate at least that it's a red letter. We'll go a few pages into Matthew. So you can just kind of confirm that. Black letter text. Nice black letter text. And we'll go to the end and you can see that Bible dictionary. There we go. So there's the end of Revelation. There is a little date code down here and it says 10M39. So I'm not sure if that means the 10th month of 39, or if that means that, really, if I had to guess, I'd probably guess 10 and then M for 1,000. So maybe 10,000 of these book blocks were printed in 1939. And usually the way they do it, especially for a popular edition like the Cameo, they'll print off 10,000, right, book blocks, and then they'll just leave them and they'll kind of bind off of them over the years. So, at the factory, they'll have 10,000 Cameo book blocks, and, one year they might bind 2,000 of them, the next year 2,000, next year, maybe 4,000. I think it's based on sales, but if that were to be my guess, and 1939, and they printed quite a few of them. So we have a concise biblical encyclopedia based on the Cambridge Companion to the Bible. And here's where it's going to get hard. I messed myself up by saying it's, these are relatively easy to turn. You have a preface there. I'll show you that. If you guys want to read, feel free to pause. Then we have weights and measures and coinage. Then you have your Bible dictionary, and I will show you that nice and close. If you guys are interested, you can see some of it. Read a couple of the entries. The Bible dictionary goes on for a little bit. And it's pretty standard for like what you would see in Bible dictionaries. There's a few little charts and some entries. I think they have like the harmony of the Gospels. They have an explanation of kind of the Old and the New Testaments. Just some useful information. And again, if this is meant for a teacher, it would be useful information, because it's going to be the kind of things that I'm sure somebody would be asking at some point. Right, so it is a fairly sizable Bible dictionary. And I'm wondering if the concordance is the same size as the normal concordance. And I have a feeling it is not, because it looks much thinner than the normal concordance. The normal concordance is fairly chunky. And this just seems kind of paltry by comparison. Right, but there you have your concordance title page. I will show you that as well if I can turn a page. There we go. And you can see how well this paper is held up. It is a little bit yellowed, but it doesn't look like extremely oxidized. Sometimes you get these and they're like almost brown because they've oxidized so heavily. But this just looks like a nice, kind of pleasant yellowing. And you can see here where the kind of the last signature there is coming apart. So sometimes, like, I can appreciate overcast stitching because it's supposed to help prevent this, but it just kind of moves it to the end of the signature instead of to the middle of the signature. So in the long term, it doesn't help. It'd be great if every Bible had it and if it worked, but I guess that's not always the case. It does say Cambridge, printed by W. Lewis, M.A. at the University Press. And here's your index to maps. I'm curious how much of this sort of additional information has changed over the years. I would imagine a good bit, as they made discoveries and such. But now the maps are printed on Bible paper. They're not printed on anything thicker than what you would normally see. They are using kind of some pastel colors, which I'm not a super fan of. And then also you can see just how crowded some of these maps get. It's just a lot of information kind of crammed in there. The real killer is just the fact that they do that topographic information, right? Like all the hills and the valleys, and they try and illustrate that, but it just ends up being a garbled mess. They should have either done it with different colored inks or gradations of inks, and if they couldn't do that, I would have just preferred they left it off. There's no real need for it. It's not like I'm going to go climbing in Jerusalem and there should be a mountain here. It doesn't matter to me. And then we have 2 blank pages of thin Bible paper, and then we have several thick sheets of paper at the end, like 4 of them. And there's a little date code down there. I'll show that to you right quick. Maybe. It does say 28X, XLI maybe, or XLL, or maybe XL1, something like that. So, very nice Bible. Again, very trim by comparison, and I'll show you guys that when I do the big comparison video at the end. But it is very trim out of all the editions. It's the same footprint, right? Just a different thickness. So let's go ahead and get your measurement. If I pull the Yapps open, it comes in at 7 and 5 6/8, 7 3/4 of an inch tall by 5 1/4 inches wide. And a nice trim edition here. It's going to be probably just over an inch. It's like 1 1/4 thick. Good trim size. Let's go ahead and take a look at the font size. If I remember correctly, the last edition I measured was like, I think 9 point. So take a look at the uppercase, the M right here. Looks a little smaller, an 8.5, the capitals versus Times New Roman. And then we will look at an M here in make, which I think was a 9, the lowercase. Yeah, 9. So a 9-point font for the lowercase versus Times New Roman. Like I always say, we go by the lower. I go by the lowercase only because there's more lowercase letters than uppercase letters. So I would say overall a 9-point font for this Cambridge Cameo, just like all the other Cambridge Cameos. Bible buddies, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please feel free to leave them down below. I have been noticing that some people have been asking for some comparisons, so I'm hoping to at some point circle back around and get to those comparisons. I don't want to leave you guys hanging, and I do have access to them. Now, I will say, if you guys are looking for a comparison video between Oxford Bibles, say you want like a comparison between like an Oxford Emerald and an Oxford Agate, I do have plans to make one very large, probably very long video comparing every single Oxford edition that they produced back in the day. I will say that there are a lot of editions, so you guys are going to have to bear with me. It is going to be quite a labor of love. And as of yet, I think I'm still missing... I think I need like an Oxford Royal, which is like the huge one. It's a quarto edition. If you guys are familiar with that, I mean, it's like it's like a pulpit Bible essentially. I see one on, so I see one online, and it's staring at me, and I was looking at it, and it's a little too high of a price for me. So I've been trying to negotiate a few times, and the person doesn't want to come down as much as I'd like. So I'm trying to give it time to where they'll be more flexible to come down off the price a little bit more. I did see one pop up, which was super interesting, that had the Apocrypha. And that one, oh man, that one looked, it was pretty beat up. It was pretty old, but it would have been nice, I think, to have like a nice pulpit Bible with the Apocrypha. Would have been cool. But either way, hopefully I will get them all, and then I'll have something to provide for you guys, some form of entertainment, or at least to quench your curiosity. I don't know. Bible buddies, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave them down below. Otherwise, if you could like, comment, subscribe, all that cool YouTube stuff would be much appreciated. Until next time, bye.